Looks like the Saiyans brought some of their friends along for the ride.
No, they grew them here.
What?
Don't ask.
That's okay. It doesn't really matter.
Rude. No manners at all.
Hey everyone, Poohead189 here, and today we're going to be doing a deep dive on the Saibamen. Next month I'll be focusing on the androids, and then the Kais after that, but since I've done the Saiyans and the Namekians, I decided to do one on the Saibamen with the early Z theme before we get into the other stuff. So after this, I'll do another technique breakdown, and then we'll do a few videos on the Android saga, including the race breakdown, but back to the topic at hand. The Saibamen, also called cultivars in the Viz translation, appear in chapter 214 of the manga. They are a race of goblin-like botanical life forms and alien monsters that serve the Saiyans essentially like attack dogs. Now, Toriyama gives us two different versions of the Saibamen's origins. Back in the late 80s, Toriyama told the Dragon Ball Z anime staff that Saiyan scientists had created them through biotechnology, essentially making them bio-androids. But later on, in an interview in Sakyo Jump in 2018, Toriyama says the Saiyans discovered them on a faraway planet and essentially domesticated them as minions and grunts of war. So it appears as if the Saibamen's origins are contradictory, and this sort of situation is where people tend to disagree. When it comes to canonicity, some people believe the first statement that is made is the true statement, and any after is contradictory and not taken seriously. Some are of the opinion that the latter statements are more true and considers any statements made after overriding the previous ones. I'm usually in the camp that tries to bridge the gap between the two if it's possible, and if not, I usually go with the one that seems to be the most plausible. So let's dive into that, though beforehand I need to point out that apparently in the Daizenshuu, it's stated that the Saibamen we see in the manga are a special variant, most notably being stronger than usual. So whatever we do here, we still need to know and realize that these Saibamen might differ in other ways to the more common type. But since we only see these Saibamen in the manga and none others, we'll still have to use them for this video as the basis for all speculation. With that being said, let's start. And we'll start by reviewing their appearance and fights in the Saiyan saga, because unlike the other races, most of the information we have on the Saibamen, especially their origins, because both are contradictory, can only really be made if we view the manga and see what we could take from what it seems to show. When they're introduced, Nappa produces a sort of curious dual-purpose bottle. On the top end are the seeds, and on the bottom end is the liquid. It is unclear if the liquid is water or something special to help them grow better or more quickly. I always assumed it was a special liquid, but we cannot know for certain. Nappa kneels down and plants them in the ground, in a pretty shallow sort of planting, stating the soil in their location is ideal for Saibamen. It takes an extremely short time for them to grow from seeds to fully grown. The manga states that their power rivals Raditz at 1200. However, I should note that Toriyama did comment once, saying that Raditz was slightly more powerful, and the Daizenshuu does state Raditz's power level is 1500. However, Raditz was also certain that Piccolo's special beam cannon at 1330 power level would kill him, and as I stated in my Saiyan video, Saiyans tend to be tougher than their power levels would allow, so it seems more safe to assume that Raditz has a power of 1200, but the Saibamen just aren't as durable. Or he has a power of maybe 1250 if we really want to give him a little bit more. But this is a video on the Saibamen, not Raditz. I just wanted to point that out before we continue. Anyway, the Saibamen have a power of 1200, and these are stronger variants than normal. In the anime, Nappa says the Saibamen were veterans from a crazy battle on a planet called Tradic, which, while not in the manga, does give credence on the Saibamen being different than a more common variety. So the rest of the Z fighters arrive, and Vegeta proposes a small, sort of tournament-style one-on-one. which the Earth's defenders accept in order to buy time for Goku to show up. However, we really only get to see Yamcha and Tien fight the Saibamen one-on-one, and Tien volunteers to go first. Now, at this time, Tien is the strongest member of the Z Fighters except for Piccolo, with a power of 1830 according to the Daizenshu, which means he is half again as strong as the Saibamen, and he proves it. The battle starts out, and in one move, Tien has the upper hand, utilizing an empty force technique, which is actually a theoretical real-world technique practitioners seek to achieve, called Qigong. But as the Saibaman regains his stance, we get to see a unique ability the Saibamen seem to possess, which is a projectile attack where the creature's head opens and spits out a stream of acidic liquid. Now, we don't really know how strong the acid is. Everyone does dodge the move, but that could either be because 1, they know it is a very potent form of some kind, or 2, they do not know and just want to be safe. It's hard to say, but likely the most curious thing about it is that it shoots out of the Saibaman's skull, and we do know that the Saibamen have skeletons made of bone, including skulls, as we see it when Piccolo kills the last Saibaman. But that also means that the Saibamen likely do not have brains, or at least brains as we see them. We also don't see any brains when Vegeta destroys the initial Saibaman and we get a good look at its insides. This does seem very odd, but a lot of scientists do theorize that plants can think and even have memories, though in a way humans can't really comprehend. So it's possible the Saibamen have an advanced form of highly evolved plant-like intelligence without the need of a traditional brain like most highly evolved creatures. Back to the fight, Tien defeats it in one solid hit. His earlier strike was likely a way to just knock his opponent off balance, but regardless, it takes 2 moves and the Saibaman is out. It takes a bit for the creature to even get back up, and when it does so very slowly and shakily, obviously in no condition to really fight much anymore. As we all know, Vegeta kills it rather than let the fight continue. And let's pause for a quick second as I say, this and the following fight with Yamcha is where we can really begin to learn about the Saibamen's origins. Let's talk about it. So Vegeta then tells the Saibaman after he kills this one that he was unsatisfied with how their previous comrade performed, and the Saibamen are shaken by the death of their fellow Saibaman, which seems natural, except we find out in the next fight that Saibamen are not afraid to die, actually, considering the next one had to blow itself up in order to take Yamcha out, which seems very contradictory, at least to a normal organism whose main goal is to live. Why would anything care about dying by Vegeta's hand, but gleefully go to their own death when they are fighting someone else? It seems clear that Saibamen's values are different than our own values, or the values of most organic creatures, which does align with one of the origins we are given by Toriyama, and goes against the other origin we are given by him. In Toriyama's work, one of the main aspects of androids, be it a cyborg, a mechanical being, or a biomechanical android-like cell, is that they require a purpose. Even after androids 17 and 18 killed Jiro, 17 states that they still need a purpose, and so they will go after what Jiro wanted, which is Goku. That was definitely android 16's purpose, though it gradually changes over time. And this coincides very well with the Saibamen's psychology. You see, when the Saibamen were grown, they immediately followed both Nappa and Vegeta's orders, and when Vegeta killed the Saibamen that lost to Tien, the others were shaken, but not because their comrade died. They were afraid because their comrade died without fulfilling its purpose. So Vegeta's execution wasn't a punishment in the way that we think it was. It was a punishment because he robbed the Saibaman of its entire reason for existing, letting it die in a way that is antithetical to its own existence, and the others saw it that way. And when we get to Yamcha fighting the Saibaman, though Yamcha is a bit weaker than Ten Shinhan, we can also easily see that this Saibaman is fighting harder than its dead comrade, not wanting to die in the same fashion, wanting to fulfill its purpose or of killing its enemy. And we can even see its unbridled need to kill Yamcha even before the fight was done. After Yamcha and the Saibamen fought for a moment, and the Saibamen realized that even at its best, it still was no match for Yamcha, it retreated for a second and then launched itself at Yamcha in what very much looks like its first attempt at self-destructing. As you can see here, that it did its very best to grab Yamcha in order to blow up right there. But Yamcha, of course, dodged it. But as soon as it realized it was no match for Yamcha conventionally, we see it gleefully going to its death as it tried to suicide bomb itself. And of course, once Yamcha dodges and blasts it with ki, the Saibaman is defeated. And then, does it again, but this time successfully. Though let's do a little side note real quick and say that, in my opinion, Yamcha fighting the Saibaman is one of the most important fights in the entire series. Not for its plot importance, but for how it's a primer for both Gohan and the audience and how one can see fighters move who move at superhuman speeds. I think the anime does this extremely well, as Piccolo tells Gohan not to blink, and he tells him essentially what he's told in the manga, which is that you need to sense their ki, and we gradually begin to hear the fight. Quiet at first, and then louder, and then we start to see sparks before we finally see Yamcha and the creature fighting. The manga panels make a much smaller deal of it, but it's still pivotal information for a new reader, though it does beg the question on how Nappa and Vegeta can see them considering they cannot sense ki. Perhaps Saiyan eyes are just made for it, or maybe they can sense their movement but can't gauge power levels. We also learn about how mundane creatures, like the Saibamen, can explode in order to output more energy than their usual body can allow, which is a stepping stone for that occurring later in the series, to Vegeta against Buu. Either way, great stuff. But back to the Saibamen. When Yamcha's back is turned, the creature pops up and manages to catch Yamcha in its claws before it blows itself up with a smile, killing them both. Vegeta finds it amusing, but Nappa is furious that even then, the best his Saibamen can do is do a draw from self-destruction. And it's interesting how Nappa seems to value these Saibamen here. He almost treats them like sort of prized wolfhounds, since, we discussed in the Saiyan video that Nappa is a noble, and obviously nobility in, our world tend to stereotypically have like wolfhounds and go out hunting and stuff like that. So I would say, especially for these stronger variants, maybe the Saibamen are a point of pride for a Saiyan. So it's strong Saibamen are almost like a status symbol for a Saiyan, we can maybe think. We don't really know, but it does seem that Nappa treats it that way. Anyway, back to the Saibamen and the origins. It seems that the Saibamen, not wanting to die from Vegeta's attack, but, happily dying to kill Yamcha, it seems that Saibamen have an imperative to follow their master's orders, even at the expense of their own life, which suggests that they are likely biomechanical beings, otherwise known as biological androids, which means that they are an extremely early version of the same type of being as Cell. And you might think that's a bit far-fetched, but let me put the question to you another way. Where do you think Dr. Gero got the idea for Cell? Don't forget that Dr. Gero and his spy robots are watching the battle between the Saiyans and the Earthlings, which means that it's extremely possible that Gero saw the Saibamen in action, found them to be both powerful and obedient, and discovered from alien technology on how to create the base for a biological android. Now, that is speculation, but considering all the evidence and how the timeline syncs up with it, it's honestly the most likely explanation for Cell's inception. And don't forget the Cell Juniors have a very similar look and fighting style to the Saibamen. However, let's see if we can bridge the gap between Toriyama's two statements. So, from all the evidence we can surmise that the Saibamen we see are biological androids. However, we do hear from a Toriyama interview that the Saibamen are also difficult to control and might attack their handlers. This contradicts what we see in the manga, as they seem to be extremely obedient, unto death even. But what we also know is that these Saibamen, as I've stated, are different than common variants. So it seems possible that the original Saibamen are not biomechanical, but organic, and that the organic versions could be weaker and less loyal, but still used as attack dogs for the Saiyans. Now, this is just hypothesizing, but it would explain how both of Toriyama's statements could be connected. The Saibamen we see in the manga are basically more powerful, more obedient clones, bioengineered to be better troops and servants. But of course, we will never know for sure. And if all Saibamen are like the ones we see in the manga and anime, it seems to me that biological android explanation is far more plausible than the organic explanation. However, we also need to ask a question on the Saibamen, which is, how did they know that Vegeta and Nappa were their masters? And we would then need to ask, when one grows a Saibamen, are they able to devolve or regress back into seedlings, kind of like how Cell devolved himself in order to fit into Trunks' time machine? If the Saibamen are able to become seeds again, then that explains how they know who Vegeta and Nappa were, because they would have recognized them. But that also means that after Nappa and Vegeta beat the Earthlings and left the planet, would they just leave the Saibamen on Earth to terrorize the remaining population? However, if they do not have the capability to become seeds again, then perhaps a part of their programming is to follow the directives of any Saiyan present, which also begs the question, what would have happened if Goku had arrived earlier? Would they have followed Goku's orders as well? I doubt Goku could make the Saibamen attack Vegeta or Nappa since they're also Saiyans, but could he have kept them out of the fight? We simply don't know, unfortunately, but it's food for thought. Either way, it seems the Saibamen, unlike the Z-Fighters or even the Saiyans, seem to fight with more ferocity than skill, but they are still highly dangerous opponents. In fact, considering they rival Raditz in power, and Raditz is about the same power level or slightly stronger than one of Frieza's combat troops, it's possible they are considered moderately powerful compared to the universe at large. The Saibamen also seem to have low cunning, even if they are unable to speak a language. Obviously, they are sentient, as they realize varying implications. They know how to deceive an opponent, and after Krillin dispatches of most of them, the last one goes for one of the smallest and weakest members of the Z-Fighters, being Kid Gohan, in order to maximize its advantage of surprise, and at least get one kill for their masters. Of course, Piccolo fucks it up instead, but it still showed the creature's thought process. It's also unknown if Saibamen can fly. They only seem to be able to jump. And considering they are more bestial than most sentient creatures, it seems unlikely they learned how to fly. But they are still very dangerous, with sharp claws and a love of violence. Now, that's all I really have to say about the Saibamen. We don't really have too much information on them, but I do want to do a quick side note on a creature that appears to be extremely similar, which are the Biomin from DBZ Movie 2, World's Strongest. We don't need to speculate if these are biological androids, as that is pretty explicit considering who they serve, being Dr. Cochin and Dr. Wheelo. They appear very much like Saibamen in form, though their eyes look to be lenses and their bodies are dark blue instead of green. In a movie guidebook, they are also stated to have a power level of 1,000, which means they are slightly weaker than the manga Saibamen. However, unlike the Saibamen, they both have the ability to speak and to work together and use team tactics. They are able to overpower and brutalize Gohan. However, both Piccolo and Roshi appear to handle multiple of them with only a bit of effort. There's not much to say about them, but I wanted to mention them here since they're extremely similar. Okay guys, that about wraps up the video. Thanks so much for watching. Up next we have a technique video, and then we'll dive into the Android Saga. Please like, share, and subscribe if you feel I deserve it, as it always helps, and I hope to see your comments below. Thanks, guys.